All right, let's talk to Greeny. It's been far too long since we have
Yes.
talked to Greeny. I don't know where he finds the time for this. Like I'm sure it's very, very rewarding and it's outstanding. But the man is working every time I look up, and now he does countdown. Obviously, he's been one of our great friends for all of these years. The new book is called "Got Your Legends: Ranking America's Sports Franchises and Their Most Iconic Figures." And he continues to do this with our good friend Hembo as well. They collaborated to dissect the four biggest American sports leagues, 124 franchises for the crown of greatest of all. Only one can sit at the top. For the first time ever, Got Your Legends ranks all of the franchises and explains which teams are legendary or unique or exciting, tragic, or laughable. And I'm sure we've got a few of those.
Yo.
It's available now on Amazon. How many Bears laughable teams did you cover back in your day, Greeny? And it's great to talk to you.
Hi, fellas. Not so much. The Bears were pretty good when I covered them, and the Bears actually, all of the Chicago sports franchises, fare much better than people might currently think, including some who've been real bad, like the Chicago White Sox, ranked in the top third of sports. Let me very quickly give you the conceit of the book here. We ranked every single team in sports from 1 through 124, every team in the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, and Major League Baseball, using a variety of criteria: championships, winning percentage, social relevance, and all that sort of thing. Franchises that have been around a really long time have an overwhelming advantage. It's unfair, but there's really no way to work around it. So teams like the Cubs and the White Sox and the Bears and the Blackhawks, who are all something like founding fathers of their respective sports leagues, have a built-in advantage because they've just had more time to accumulate success. They haven't all had enormous success, obviously, but they had more success historically than they have in more recent years. So the Chicago teams generally fare well. And then for each team, for all 124 of them, and this is by far, I think, the most provocative part of the book, we choose the Mount Rushmore of every one of those teams. We choose the four legends, the four franchise faces of every one of the franchises. And there's going to be a lot of discussion, and I have been waiting for this because there are a lot of people in Chicago who I think are not going to like some of the choices that I made, but I am 100% ready to defend them, particularly when it comes to the Bulls.
Before
Interesting.
I was going to say
Can we
real
guess
quick.
them? Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask, like, when you and Hembo have a disagreement, who wins out?
There are no disagreements. So people ask that all the time. Hembo does all of the research. We have all of the data in front of us, and then we go through it. We do this mostly scientifically. So the only decisions we have to make are what are we going to prioritize. So like our priorities when we're ranking teams are championships trump everything. If you have two teams and they both play for a decade, and one of them spends 9 years in last place and wins a title, and the other team spends 10 years over 500 but wins no titles, we're giving it to the champion. The objective of this stuff is winning championships, and that trumps everything else. That was our primary guiding principle, and then we went on from there. And that's the reason why the Bulls, despite the fact that with the exception of that one glorious decade, they don't really have a particularly storied history. There was some success there in those teams that had Sloan and Van Leer and Bob Love. And then when Derrick Rose was there and he was the MVP, they had a couple of good years. But by and large, the Bulls have not been a good franchise outside of the 90s. But the 90s were so extraordinary that they more than made up for that. And so the Bulls check in right behind the Celtics and Lakers among the best franchises in the sport, just slightly ahead of the Spurs, who are actually stunningly good and much more consistently good than the Bulls have been. But the Bulls have one more title, and that means everything.
All right, so do you think we'll find your Bears Mount Rushmore controversial?
Go ahead and guess who they are.
All right, so it's certainly Walter Payton's. You start with
the
Payton.
Bears one is not going to be controversial.
Right.
Well, let me just tell you ahead of time that it's not all players. You can put coaches, executives, and others on it. So you're going to guess the Bears one easily.
All right, so Waddle, obviously I think Gale Sayers and Butkus are on there, right? That's what I think he's going to put. And then
think about championships. So Hallis,
right, and that's what I was going to ask you. Is it Hallis or Ditka? Because
it's both.
Yeah.
It's Hallis and Ditka plus Butkus, and then the most obvious of them all, which I think either you didn't say or just didn't think of yet, but it's Walter Payton, who's the greatest player in franchise history. So no Gale Sayers, which was agonizing to do, but it is impossible to do a book representing the franchise of the Chicago Bears without including George S. Halas. It's just not, you just can't do it. He's too important to the history of the league and to the history of the franchise. Again, this is a franchise that dates back essentially to the founding of the NFL. Choosing between Butkus and Gale Sayers was tough to do, but not really. I think Butkus's career, I love Gale Sayers, and I'm the last person in the world. The thing I hate about making sports arguments is that in order to glorify someone, you sometimes feel like you have to diminish someone else. I'm not here to diminish Gale Sayers at all, but between Butkus and Ditka, because of Ditka's, he was on the championship team in the 60s and then came back and coached them to the only championship that they've won in the Super Bowl era. Ditka, I thought, was a no-brainer, and he was the first tight end inducted into the Hall of Fame. And then Walter Payton, who I've said many times, if you were to put together the all-time 22, if you were to have the all-time best football team, the 11 best offense in the history of the sport, my starting backfield would be Jim Brown and Walter Payton. I think he's the second best running back that ever lived. So there was no way he wasn't going to be on the list. So it broke my heart not to put Gale Sayers in there, but he doesn't make it.
Who made your honorable mention list, Greeny, that wasn't on the Mount Rushmore, but at least you guys had a conversation about?
So we wrote about them. So I write chapters about all of them. So there are plenty. Let me go to the Bears chapter and see who. Tommy, I'm sorry I didn't get you in, but
it's all good. It's all good.
But how close was it, Greeny? Was it close?
It was just a few notches down. But here, what did I say about? So I write a whole chapter about the history of the Bears and all of that, when they were founded as the Decatur Staleys and all of that. So where are we here? Who else do I mention in here? We talk about a lot of the players from the championship teams. So, I mean, obviously Dan Hampton and Mike Singletary, Brian Urlacher, they had a number of legendary and all-time great players. Sayers is definitely, I think, historically the best player who's not on the list, although one might make an argument for Mike Singletary. I feel very strongly about the four guys that we chose.
Okay. And then you said now the Bulls one would be a little more controversial?
The Bulls one, you're going to get pissed off at me.
Okay. This is interesting. Obviously, it starts at Michael and goes to Scotty. Those two, I'm certain about that you have them on there. And now that you just put the parameters that coaches can be on there, you got to have Phil. Those are the three constants
Correct.
Of the championships.
Did you say front office people can be part of it, Greeny?
Yes.
So I'm going to give you
go,
Jerry
Waddle.
Krause.
That's correct. And I am willing to have this fight with everybody, and so far I have. Here's the bottom line. Jerry Krause, I think, is one of the most inappropriately remembered people in the history of sports because he was cantankerous and disheveled, and because Scottie Pippen got mad at him because Jerry Reinsdorf wouldn't redo his contract, and the entire team basically turned Jerry Krause into a villain, and that reputation has lasted so long and strongly that his widow was booed when they introduced him at the stadium, and he did not get into the Hall of Fame until after he was dead. Jerry Krause selected Phil Jackson from the CBA's Albany Patroons, a guy that everyone thought was too weird and too much of a hippie to ever come back to the NBA. And he single-handedly chose him, handpicked him, brought him back, and then in a very controversial move, removed Doug Collins, who had achieved great success, and installed Phil Jackson as the head coach, and that led to 6 championships. On one draft night, he acquired Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant. He traded Will Perdue straight up for Dennis Rodman, and he had a nonstop conveyor belt of outstanding role players that he consistently refreshed over the course of a decade that led to teams winning 6 championships. And while he is in some ways, I think, credited or discredited for having broken that team up or broken up the dynasty, I've never been convinced that he was as singularly responsible for it as he is sometimes said to be. I know the players hated him. I'm not sure that's really relevant to anything. I think that if you consider the job that general managers have done in the history of the sport, you could make an argument that only Red Auerbach had a better run than he did, maybe Jerry West in Los Angeles, but the Showtime Lakers didn't win as many titles as the Bulls did. So I believe, if only because he is given so little credit, I felt obligated to give him that credit. And I know Derrick Rose was the MVP of the league. I know Bob Love is in the Hall of Fame. I know Jerry Sloan and Norm Van Lier and many others were great players. Dennis Rodman had only three great years in a Bulls uniform. They had a lot of other great players. But I felt very strongly about this. I know a lot of people disagree. I know Michael Jordan disagrees, and that's fine. The beauty of sports is that we can sit down over a beer and argue over this. But I feel really strongly that he is one of the least. He gets less appreciation relative to his accomplishment than almost anyone in sports I can think of.
I can't give you a huge pushback. I mean, you laid it out well. I mean, I would put Derek up there, but the way you laid it out, and like I've been sometimes a guy who's brought up the negatives about Jerry. I don't know if you ever heard this story, Greeny. During COVID, when we were doing The Last Dance, and obviously that played here bigger, it was so important for the country during that time because there was no sports. Mm-hmm. And obviously, you know that it was so big here. When we had Tim Floyd on, and I don't know, because I had never known this story either. And I think your last year in Chicago, but I don't know if it's ever been exposed, that when the Bulls were winning their fourth championship in Seattle, and they're up 3-0, Jerry Krause flew Tim Floyd to Seattle to meet with him and Jerry Reinsdorf, and they were ready to pull the trigger on firing Phil Jackson after the fourth one and not the sixth one.
I had not heard that. I don't understand it for the life of me. And I guess, so look, here's what I guess my response is. I mean, that's obviously nonsensical. Yes. And ridiculous and every other adjective one might describe to it. But here's what I'll say. It didn't happen, right? The Phil Jackson wound up however this wound up being the case, he wound up remaining the coach for 2 more years, and they wound up winning 6 championships in an 8-year stretch, and it probably would have been more if Michael Jordan had not prematurely retired in 1993. By the way, a name I forgot to mention was when a lot of his star players, including Michael, didn't love it, he went out and found and made a priority of bringing Tony Kukoc to the Bulls, yes, who was a player who was an integral part of the last 3 championships that they won. And so long before people were going to Europe and bringing players here and making them integral parts of NBA teams, Krause was doing that. So, and I just thought of that, so I wanted to say it. That's a ridiculous story, obviously. I'm not defending Jerry Krause as a person. I barely knew him because of the way I've talked about him in recent years. People think that I was friendly with him. I most certainly was not. When I covered the Bulls, I was in my 20s. He knew who I was because I was just one of the people who was around, but we had no relationship to speak of. And I witnessed him. I observed him the same way everyone else did. He was cranky, he was cantankerous, and he was disheveled. Those are not opinions. They're an obvious statement of fact, but they don't change what the team accomplished. And I think it is just interesting that he doesn't tend to ever get any of the credit for that. And the reality is Michael didn't win those championships alone. Michael is the greatest player ever. He is the greatest player that ever lived. I will go to my grave saying that. There isn't anything anyone can ever do that will displace him in my mind. But he didn't win those alone. And every piece that won those championships alongside Michael was put in place by Jerry Krause, and including the coach and including Scottie Pippen and including everybody else. He made the trade of Charles Oakley for Bill Cartwright, which everyone didn't like, but it turned out to have been absolutely the right move. And Cartwright was an important part of those teams that won those championships, and Horace Grant wound up being a better piece to fit with that group than Charles was, as good a player as Oakley was. So I can't argue. I'm not trying to argue the man. You know, I recognize that a lot of people disliked him, and there was probably good reason for it. I did not know him. but I'm judging his accomplishments, and I think his accomplishments were practically unmatched in the history of the sport.
Greeny, is this the choice that you think that you received the most, pushback or blowback from, or was there another selection that you made for a different team or a different sport that people were even more excited about saying, no, you're wrong?
There are a few. I mean, it really sort of varies based upon who I'm talking to. We do literally every team.
Right.
So, everyone's got their favorites and everyone's got their teams. And this one I knew when I looked at Hembo and I said, I'm putting Jerry Krause on this thing. And he just started to laugh. And I said, here's my reasoning. The Bulls are where they are in our pecking order. They're behind the Celtics and Lakers in terms of historical significance. The rest of their history, for the most part, sucks. Mm-hmm. So they are only where they are because of those teams. So I think it makes all the sense in the world to have all four faces come from that era. Like most of them, like there are, as you see with the Bears, it spans decades. It spans practically a century with the Bears. With the Bulls, it's all concentrated in one little tiny era. And Derrick Rose was an MVP and was a great player. I certainly could have justified putting him on. So there was a part of me that sort of felt like when I made that decision, Hembo just started to laugh. And I said, it's the right thing to do. This is the right thing to do. He said, everyone's going to be mad. I said, let them be mad. So I think I was sort of preemptively prepared for that one. It is probably the one that has gotten the most attention. But here's the other thing I'll say about it. We live in times where we are arguing over so many things as a culture, as a society, that are really important and cause great anxiety, and I'm not diminishing any of that. I feel like my place in all of this is to try and provide whatever respite from that I can, whatever shelter from that storm I can. That's what I try and make my shows, and that's what I try and make my books. So if we can get together, some people are going to get together over a beer and argue over whether or not Jerry Krause belongs on this list, and argue passionately and yell at each other over it, and then order another beer and walk out the door still best friends, then I feel that we have done something for the culture that the culture desperately needs. So that's the kind of argument I like.
Yeah, and you can grab it on Amazon. I have a Bears question for you, and then we're going to have to run. But really, really quick, please tell me that you put Sammy on there for the Cubs.
Hold on a second. Let me go to I had prepared the Bulls and Bears for this conversation. Let me get to the Cubs. The Cubs are a little lower down than I had remembered. I put Harry Carey on the Cubs list. I want to know what you think of that. So here was my thinking on putting Harry on the Cubs list. Harry Carey, while I know he broadcast for the Cardinals longer than he did the Cubs, and I know that there is a generation of Cubs fans that will still consider Jack Brickhouse to be the voice of Cubs baseball, I believe because of WGN and the Superstation, Harry Carey made more people Cubs fans than any other person that ever lived, including anyone who played for them. I think Harry Carey, and when I was in town, I would argue that for the period of time in the 80s and the 90s, at a time when Mike Ditka and Michael Jordan were in Chicago, that Harry Carey was the most beloved sports figure in the city. And so I put him on this list unapologetically. So Sammy Sosa is not on it.
Oh,
the reason Sammy is not on it.
How could you not have the most productive offensive player in Cubs history on there? Now you're factoring in steroids?
Because Sammy Sosa weighed 147 pounds and then was exclusively so you tell me who he should go ahead of. Does he go ahead of Ernie Banks?
Yes.
Sammy Sosa goes ahead of Ernie Banks?
Yes. He had 600 home runs. He was another reason why all those people. I can't argue with Harry because of the free agency. We'll argue another time, Greeny. I want to ask you about the Bears. I want to ask you about the Bears because we got you here.
Sure.
So grab Greeny's book, and then we're gonna to be continued on the Sammy Sosa stuff. You guys have been very, very, I think, fair to Caleb Williams. Like there has not been a lot of, Caleb is a bust and Caleb is this. What are you seeing right now? For even early after that first game, you guys didn't jump on him like some others have done. What have you seen from Caleb, and where do you think he can go?
So I have enormous respect for Dan Orlovsky's opinions when it comes to quarterbacking. And he has been saying to me from the moment they hired Ben Johnson, he said two things. One, this is the perfect coach for him. Two, it's not going to happen fast, because the stuff that Ben Johnson is going to want him to do is stuff he has never done, and it's really hard to learn. And I've had that same conversation with Alex Smith. And Alex on Sundays did like a little demonstration of what it is like when you turn your back to the defense. These are things, Tommy, that are probably second nature to you. But to people like me, it's not as obvious as it wouldn't be as obvious until someone actually says it as it is. But when you have played your entire life in the shotgun, where you are staring at the defense from the moment the huddle breaks, if you're even in a huddle, it is a vastly different thing to take the snap from center, drop back, and turn your back to the defense. You turn around again not knowing what picture you're going to look at. And until you become accustomed to that, Alex and Dan have told me over and over again, that is going to take time. So what Caleb Williams is going to be by the end of this season is going to be vastly different from what he is now. I think you see the pieces. Like, first of all, he's freakishly talented. I mean, that's, you don't need me to tell you that. Anyone watching him can see that. And I think he has what it takes to then to become what he has the potential to become is the maniacal desire to do it. And because he has this sort of offbeat way about him, I think some people have questions about that, because he just is a different guy, right? It just, you guys know it better than I do, but anyone can see it. He has a different way about him that is not, it's not what we have traditionally envisioned, these quarterbacks being. But I think he does have that desire. I think he will do the work that is necessary. I think he will get better and better at this. And I think you are seeing the signs of it. So I don't think the Bears are going to make the playoffs this year, but I think by Thanksgiving, you're going to say to yourself, maybe for the first time ever, we've got the guy. And once you've got the guy, the rest of it is going to fall into place around him. So I think next year, the Bears are going to be really good.
I would say this, Greeny, through 3 games. Again, I'm with you. I don't think they're a playoff team. I don't think they're going to the Super Bowl this year, but I know the offense works, and I know that Caleb is making progress. In the first 3 games, they're averaging 361 yards and 23 points per game. They're converting 46% of their third downs, and they're 6 of 7 inside the red zone, converting those opportunities into touchdowns. That's situational football. And when you're good at the situational stuff, you're pointed in the right direction. So while they may not be where they're going to be, they're making strides based on those numbers I just gave you.
I agree. I like I'm saying, I think the division is just really good, right? I mean, the Lions are really good. I think the Lions are the best team in the NFC. The Packers might be third, or maybe even second by the time it's all said and done. And the Vikings are formidable. So that's a tough mountain to climb while you're still trying to climb it. Caleb is climbing his own mountain, and then the Bears have to climb that mountain. But I think the timing of it should all work out pretty well, because at the time that those other teams start coming back down a little bit in salaries and everybody's window is limited, the Bears should be the team on the ascent. So I think they'll win more. I think they'll win 8-9 games this year, and I think they'll look better and better as the season goes on. And I think by the end of the year, he will look really good. And I think the projections into next season are going to be through the roof.
By the way, this is another reason why we can't go 2 months without talking to you. We blew right through that clock because we have so much. We had so much more that we wanted to talk to you about. But congrats on another great book. It's available now on Amazon. Got Your Legends, ranking America's sports franchises and their most iconic figures. Greeny, we watch every day, and we thank you for joining us. Don't be a stranger, okay?
Thanks, Greeny.
No, listen, here's what I want to do. I want you to let's set aside a time next week that we do this again, because I want to go through the Cubs and the rest of the teams on this. That's exactly what the book is for. So let's figure out a time that works in the next couple of weeks at least, and do this again when we're not as busy, because there's a lot more to get to.
Yep. Greeny, great stuff. Thanks a lot.
All right, boys. Thank you, fellas. See you soon.
There you go. There's Mike Greenberg, our good